That's about it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm finding the contest, my QSO numbers are way up, but the multipliers are not necessarily way up. The conditions are not maybe as good or whatever, but I'm making more contacts. I'm realizing, yep, that's COVID effect. It'll probably go
Yep.
away
So
next year.
last year, a week from now, first weekend of March, the ARLDX contest, I was in V4 in St. Kitts, had a great time, flew home on an empty airplane, and then the whole world shuts down. So have not been close to an airport since then. It's killing me. I want to go somewhere so bad.
Yeah, I did St. Martin a couple of times, and every time I said, I ain't going back to New England the contest anymore. It's just so much fun down there.
Yes, it is pretty nice. Okay, we ready to go?
Yes, we're ready to go. So everyone, welcome to Randy Thompson, K5ZD. He's going to talk about tips for being a better contester, or tips for just being a new contester if you've never been a contester before. It is the best part of amateur radio. Trust me on this. You really have to do it. Those contests, all you do is they take up a lot of bandwidth. No, it is just maximum fun. It is the most strongest drug you'll ever get. This is like much worse than any heroin or cocaine, because once you're into it, you're never going to get out. So Randy, take it away.
All right. Well, with that, I'm glad you said all that. I wouldn't go quite that far, but there's plenty of room in ham radio for everybody. But this happens to be a part that Mitch and I are really enthusiastic about. So yes, I am going to talk about being a better contest operator, but really this is more geared towards people who are just curious about what contesting is. I've been a ham since 1973. I moved around a lot growing up. I was primarily in Texas. That's why I have a 5 call. And I've been active in contesting almost since the first month I got my license. I got involved in field day, and it was just like, wow, you can work all these guys in a very short period of time. It's awesome. I was editor of the National Contest Journal a few times. I've been director of some contests, which has been a really great way to give back to the hobby. And so when Mitch asked me to present here, I'll always be happy to talk about contesting. I can hear somebody typing. So Mitch, you may want to mute everybody, although I'll have to figure out how to unmute if you do that. Okay, so yeah, well, we'll just leave it because I can't get to the unmute button right now. All right, so anyway, ham radio contesting is really a game if you think about it. Games we're all familiar with, could be golf, tennis, football, baseball, whatever. But you've got players or participants. You've got rules that set the boundaries, and that's really the most important thing about the rules, to set the boundaries, and also a method to determine who the winner is, which is the score. And different contests are trying to promote different things. Some contests really spend a lot of energy on making sure that people do things accurately, and some contests are focused on working lots of countries or working people all across the USA or working different counties or whatever the case may be. So those things go into the rules. And then once you know what the rules are and you know how the score is being done, then you get the strategy. What's the right way to win? Or what gives me an advantage given whatever my situation is? Contesting has different players, and all of these are fine. And some people will move from one category to the other, from one contest to the next. Obviously, the competitor class, the guys at the top, really love this stuff. It's their whole focus in life. I have to put myself in this category. I live on a hill with a long, steep driveway that's terrible in the winter so that I can live on a hill and have towers and antennas and be loud and work lots of people in contests. But it doesn't mean you have to be that way. There's lots of guys who just get on. They like working people. They don't have big stations. They don't set winning scores, but they really enjoy it. That's great. And then there's a lot of people who just turn the radio on and hear a contest going on, and they make a few contacts, or they say, well, I'm going to try this contest and see how it goes. All of these are extremely important, because if we just had one category and not the others, we wouldn't have a competition, right? We need all these people, and the more the merrier. So by all means, join in. And regardless of what level you're at, improving your skills makes the game more fun. I love to play golf. I'm terrible at it. I probably should go take some lessons, but I still get out there and hack around, because I find it entertaining for 4.5 hours to go for a walk and be frustrated most of the time. But there are other sports I don't like or understand at all. So, if you just have to find what you're interested in. But if you look at the successful contesters and you look at what it takes to build a good score, there's really 5 areas I've identified. There's preparation, there's strategy, there's really operating skills, which is efficiency and accuracy, and then there's motivation. So a successful contester is prepared. And what that means is doing the work to be ready and reliable. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because really, everybody's kind of got their own constraints here. But if you can invest in anything, you want to invest in antennas. The better your antennas are, and actually in some ways, the more antennas you have, the better. It makes you louder, which makes you more effective, gives you a little more flexibility. It's amazing when you have one antenna, everybody is what they are. When you have 2 antennas, they always seem to be louder on the other one. For station configuration, if you're going to do a contest for any length of time, you may be sitting in the chair operating for 1 hour, 4 hours, 8 hours, or in some cases, 47 hours. You want everything to be within easy reach. You want to have a comfortable chair. In other words, it should not be a chore to sit and operate. You shouldn't have to stand on your head or reach far away for things. And you want to do things right. I've built my station as I moved around. I've really built it 4 times. And each time I've learned things that I needed to do better. But the one thing I learned is you want to spend the money to do things right. So decent coax connectors. I used some cheapos, and I ended up having to replace all the coaxes on one 10-meter antenna because I just used the cheap ones. And same thing for if you put up towers at all, and just do it right. Spend the money. It will make things more reliable over the long term, because what you don't realize with antennas is you put them out there, and the ones that I put up in 1984 when I moved to this location, they're still there. That's a long time. And then try to have spares. There are certain things, if you look at your station, that will be single points of failure. It could be the radio, it could be the antenna switching, whatever. Try to have spares if you can. Now for station layout, this is a picture of my station. It's a little bit old, but gives you the idea. I operate with 2 radios, so I've got one radio on each side, and I really like an L-shaped table so that both radios are about the same distance apart. I'm not a touch typist, so I need to look at the keyboard and the keys and the screen back and forth pretty often, so I like the screen being right in front of the keyboard and down low. And I've put the rotators on the left. I'm right-handed, so when I'm sending with CW, I'm sending with my right hand. And so I often, you'll hear somebody and you'll want to start calling them in a pileup, and you want to turn the antenna. So I like to be able to turn the antenna while I'm sending. And then by the same reason, I put the antenna switches on the right so that I would have less chance of changing antennas while I'm transmitting or while I'm sending. Obviously, with the computer doing so much more sending now, that's still a risk, but that was the thinking. But the main thing is have everything right in front of you where you can see it. I like to have the watt meter. It's not shown in this picture, but I've got a watt meter that sits just below the screen, and that lets me know that, okay, I'm transmitting. Because it's surprising how often the amp will trip out because of high SWR or something, and you wonder why no one's talking to you anymore. It's because you're maybe only running 50 watts. So anyway, think about your organization, do the best you can to make things visible, easy to reach, and the most important things close to you. Notice the amps are up and out to the right because I don't touch them very often. So one way to evaluate your station is just think about how long does it take you to change bands? If you have to go flip 3 switches and do some other stuff and maybe play with an antenna tuner or whatever to change bands, that's going to make you not want to change bands. And there's a lot of times in a contest where things maybe aren't going so great and you'd like to go check another band, like, oh, let's go see if it's open. Well, the more stuff you have to do, the more resistance there is, the more you won't want to do that. And also the more chances that you'll make a mistake. Mark everything so that you know what they mean. Some people do it by color, like every band has a color. Some people just do it with labels, but you don't want to have to think real hard, especially as you get tired. As you go longer and longer into the contest, things that seem so obvious at the beginning are not obvious anymore. and then fix stuff if it's broken. It's amazing how there are a lot of little niggly things that you'll have in your station, and you're like, it's okay, it's not a big deal. But in a contest, it will become a big deal. So let's move on here and talk about strategy. And the key here is to know the game and have a plan for dealing with it. So you have to know the game you're going to play. You have to, every contest generally has categories, and the categories are often single op or multi-op. They're often all bands or one band. They're often high or low power, QRP, whether you're using the cluster or not. And so you've got lots of choices. And so you kind of have to sit down and decide, well, what am I trying to accomplish? If I just want to have fun, I can pick any category I want. If I want to win a certificate, now I may have to look and see results for the past years. What does it take to win a certificate? There's some categories where it doesn't take anything. You make one QSO, you're going to win. There are other ones where you're going up against maybe the top 3 guys in the country. So you want to pay attention to that. And obviously, if you want to set a record, you're in a whole different category. But even there, look at the past results of a contest. You may find there are some easy records to set. They may not be the most fun categories in the world, like 160 in the top of the sunspot cycle or something, but they become an option. Another thing is, so now that you've decided what you want to accomplish, you want to understand the scoring. And in contests, each contest that you make generates a certain number of QSO points. And so the points are allocated differently depending on the contest. They could be, in some contests, you get double points for working people on CW. In some contests, you get more points for working someone in a different continent. In the WPX contest, you get more points for working people on 40, 80, and 160 as compared to the high band. So you kind of have to look at the rules, figure out where scores come from. And then generally you add up all your QSO points and you multiply them by something. And that's why it's called a multiplier. So what are multipliers? In the ARRL sweepstakes, it's ARRL sections. In the CQ Worldwide contest, it's zones and countries. In WPX, it's prefixes. In state QSO parties, it's often counties. So you need to know what the multipliers are and where they come from. And those two things together will tell you kind of where you make score. And so as you're operating, you want to constantly be thinking, am I doing something that's increasing my score in the best way possible? And I'm going to give you an example. In the CQ Worldwide contest, let's say you have 1,000 contacts, you've already worked 100 zones, you have 250 countries, it's about 1 million points. Pretty decent score. And you tune in this huge pileup on 20 meters and you realize it's for the last zone that you need to work. There's 40 zones in the world. You've worked 39 of them on 20. You want to work, everybody loves to get the 40th one. Or because the pileup's really messy, you could go keep tuning up the band and work more people, which is the right thing to do. Well, it turns out if you do the math, going from 1,000 to 1,001 contacts gives you 2 multipliers, because in the CQ Worldwide, you get a multiplier for the zone and you'll probably get a multiplier for the country. That gives you 986,000. So you got 6,000 points for working that one station, but it got you the 40th zone. Or you go work 10 more people and notice you have a bigger score. So you kind of always need to be paying attention to how much is a multiplier worth versus working more people. And different times of the contest, in the middle of the night when it's really slow, the multiplier will often be more valuable. But in the middle of the day when there's a lot of people to talk to, it might be more valuable to go work more people. And so you end up with this ratio, how much is the multiplier worth? And some logging softwares will show this to you on the screen. But I use this example more to just help you kind of keep track as you're going through the contest. You want to always be focused on what am I doing to make the score better. Now, having said all that, if I could work the 40th zone on 20 meters just for the ego trip, I would spend the time on that. So it's not there's no black or white rule here. It's kind of partly what's fun, what drives success in your mind, and then ultimately what makes the score. So one of the things you want to do to figure out where score should come from is to do your homework. And the CQ family of contests, for the most part, have open logs, I think ARL now is publishing logs. So you can go for one of the big contests, you can go look at the logs of other people in your region, or people have stations that are the same size as yours and so on, and see what they did last year or 2 years ago, or the last part of the sunspot cycle that was the same. And see, what did they do when? What did they focus on, making QSOs or multipliers? Where did those contacts come from? What hours were they on the air? And one of the interesting things that you learn is the world turns at the same speed every year. The sun's pretty much at the same place. The population centers don't move. So when you look back at logs from the previous years, the results are very much the same from one year to the next, even as the sunspot cycle changes. And I'll give you an example. Here are charts from 2 contests that I did. They're separated. One's high spun sunspots and one's low sunspots. And the thing to pay attention to here is just kind of the way the activity waves, or the rate, rolled through the different hours over the 48 hours. And you can see it's pretty similar. And the difference is, in the high sunspot years, we do a lot of stuff on 15 and 10 meters. In the low sunspot years, you're doing it on 40 and 20, or 20 and 15. So because where the sun is and the cities or the population centers are and so on, the activity, the demographics stay the same. It's just what band you're on that makes a difference. So you can learn a lot from looking at previous logs. The next thing you want to really focus on is efficiency. How do you make contacts as quickly as possible? And this is probably the hardest thing for people who are new in the game to learn. But if you remember, if you've ever listened to air traffic controllers, and I assume probably everybody's done this somewhere along the way, and you listen to them talk, and it just sounds like, wow, how can anybody understand what they're saying? It's like blah, 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 blah. But after a while, you listen to it and you realize, oh, okay, they're exchanging information in a pretty consistent way. And then the other guy reads it back, and then they move on to the next one. And after a while, you realize, oh, it's like, I'm not a pilot, but it's like airplane call sign and or identifier and some instructions, and then the other guy reads it back. And so there's a flow. And so after a while, you realize why it becomes more intelligible, because you start to understand there's a pattern. Contest QSOs are the same way. They're always it's always kind of the same thing. It's always the same rhythm, the same pattern, and so on. And the more you can get into that rhythm and sequence, the less thinking you have to do, and the more tuned in you can get to the people that are calling. And I'll give you another example. When you learn how to drive a car, it was all you could do to keep the car in the middle of the road, right? It took all of your energy to read the road signs, push the gas, remember where the brake was, stop on the stop line. And now, after you've been driving for a while, you're eating a cheeseburger while you're talking on the phone, driving in the freeway with one hand on the wheels. I didn't say this was good, just say it, but it becomes much easier because so much of this processing becomes subconscious. And in many ways, the more experience you get in contesting, the same thing happens. And then the last thing, the better you can type, the better you'll do, for a couple of reasons. Contesting requires you to take information in through your ears and get it into the keyboard and into the log and do it accurately. So there's one thing that you'd like to be able to type quickly, just because things are going fast, but you'd also like to be able to type accurately, because I lost some points in a couple of contests here recently because I'm starting to make these stupid typos that I never used to make before. So I don't know if it's old age or I'm just not paying attention. But anyway, it's a good thing to know. So here's the key thing. We're trying to work as many people in a contest as we can. So the time box is fixed. We have X number of hours for the competition, or X number of hours that we can be on the air. We want to work as many people as we can, as quickly and accurately as possible. So just like the airplane example, it's call sign, exchange, and we're done. So somebody calls CQ, I give them my call, they give me the call in the exchange, I give them the exchange, we're done. Don't spend any time on anything that doesn't help complete the QSO. Now, that's not to say you can't say hi, Fred, or hi, Bill, or, good morning or whatever, but if the other op is really cranking, or you're trying to work a lot of people in an hour, you want to get rid of all the extraneous stuff. So you want to avoid wasting time with, please copy, the world's favorite one. Reading back what the guy sent you. Roger, the 5914, you are. My personal most hated one is the guy who finishes the contact by going QSL, QRZ, and I still don't know who he is. So anyway, get rid of everything extra. This is really true on CW, but phone as well. It's about efficiency. I want to get your call. I want to get your exchange. I want to get them in the log. I want to go to the next one. Now, I could probably spend a whole presentation on just technique and so on here, but there's a few simple things. For phone, there's no reason you shouldn't say your call almost every QSO. People are going to use crazy phonetics. Sometimes I find it's a little easier just to go back to people with the phonetics they gave me, just because, number one, they'll understand it better. Number two, I don't know what the heck they meant when they said those crazy letters, so I'm trying to figure out how to type them in. So sometimes when I say them back, it's like, oh, okay, let me make sure I got it typed in correctly. And probably one of the biggest things in phone, and I'm violating in this presentation, is you don't have to speak fast. It's not about how fast you can talk. It's really about how clearly you can talk. You listen to the good guys, they sound very relaxed, but they have a way of talking and a way of saying the phonetics so that it's very clear what they're conveying to you. They are conveying a sense of urgency without rushing. And they're conveying a sense of urgency with clarity so that you understand what they're saying. So it's a little bit of go slow to go faster. On CW, we have a whole different set of things. And one of the biggest things that I notice is people send too fast or too slow. So you want to kind of send, depending on conditions. Like you can go a lot faster on the high bands where there's not a lot of noise, whereas on 160, sometimes the speed demons, they're hard to copy. Sometimes I've had to send the guys QRS so I can slow down so I can hear you. Let the computer send as much as you can. This is worth the effort to get your computer and logging software wired in so it sends CW on your radio, because nothing is more frustrating than have a guy send you an exchange where he doesn't send all the numbers correctly, and you're left guessing, well, did ... mean two? What did that mean? So you have to ask for a repeat. So letting the computer do it means everything gets sent very nice and cleanly and so on. And in the end, like all things, practice is important, especially in CW, because it's a learned skill. You will get better the more you do it, even if it just means getting on the air and talking to people and rag chewing and so on, or using one of the Morse trainers like RUFZ or one of those. So one of the big questions people always have is, well, how do I know when I should run or when I should search and pounce? So running is when you're calling CQ. You find an open frequency, you call CQ, and you let people come to you. Search and pounce is when you're looking for people, you're tuning the band and you're calling stations that you can find. The way contesting works today, and with so much activity, your best chance of making a big score is to be running whenever possible, because you have the potential when you're calling CQ and people are answering you of being able to work 2 or 3 or even 4 people a minute. Whereas when you're search and pounce, it's very hard to get much above 1 per minute or maybe 1.5 per minute. So running is good. The other reason running is important, if you spent the whole contest tuning around calling other people, you eventually work all the people who are loud and call CQ. But you're not working all the other people who are like you. So it turns out winning a contest is about working the most people who are not in the contest. So the more you're calling CQ, the more likely it is that somebody who's just casual or just gets on for 10 minutes and tunes up the band and calls a few people will work you. And those are guys that no one else may work. So they're like extra good for you. So run whenever you can. When you can't, you want to tune around, or when sometimes you tune around because it's like, okay, I've got a lot of contacts, but I don't have very many countries. I need to go find some more multipliers. But there's no magic formula here. I can't tell you, oh, wait for this to happen and then make your decision. You kind of have to feel your way into it. And sometimes you'll get a run frequency and then people quit calling you and you realize some louder guy has kind of moved in on you. So it's kind of this is one of the skills that the good contest operators just seem to have a feeling for. It's like, is this a time where I can run, or can I get a frequency, or should I be tuning around? But again, run when you can. That's the rule here. Now, when you're calling people, and this is really true on CW, with the DX cluster now, everybody clicks on the DX cluster spot and starts calling. Well, what that means is there's 10 people calling on the exact same frequency, which on CW means you hear this tone or you hear thumping tones as loud guys are mixing with weak guys and so on. And then there'll almost always be some other signal that's just off to the side. So anytime you're in a pileup, especially on CW, you want to have your XIT button turned on and just bump it a little bit. 40, 50 hertz, 60 hertz, maybe as much as 100. I wouldn't go much more than that. Off to one side or the other. And you will be amazed at how often people will come back to you, because all they're hearing on the main frequency is noise. And then all of a sudden, off in the side of their passband will be this nice, clear signal at a different tone. It's all by itself, and they'll come right back. And so I know when I'm running people, oftentimes I'll work these really, really weak guys because they do this. They're off to the side. The other thing is when you're attacking a pileup, I talked earlier about knowing what's worth more for score. Don't waste time in a pileup where you could go off and work more people. It's surprising how often you'll hear a pileup on somebody, and then 5 KCs down the band, there's another guy in the same place, in the same country or same section. You get the multiplier without having to wait in the pileup. And you want to pay attention. Maybe you just don't have the propagation. The guy's working all W3s. Well, okay, go do something else and come back. And maybe we'll get our chance later on. But in the end, like all things, practice is important, and practice is really to exercise over and over again. So the things you need to learn is how to listen, when to call, how to call. You need to learn the bands, like when do things open, and most importantly, when did the bands open for my station? Like, I have big antennas, so maybe I can get there a little earlier. Some people, if you don't have a big antennas or you have a hill in the way, maybe you discover, all right, I should stay on a different band because the higher band will open later because there's a hill in the way. You learn this by getting on the air and chasing DX, or just getting on the air and listening or working people. And then learn your station, learn how to change bands, how to get the radios tuned up correctly, and so on. And if you want to really get a feel for how you're doing, I have 2 suggestions. Spend some time listening to the good guys. So find in like an ARL DX contest next weekend, there'll be a number of guys down in the Caribbean who will probably be running people, and listen to different ones and see how they're doing. And you'll hear some guys just seem to be able to move things along. It's very smooth. They don't get rattled. And there'll be other guys where it just seem to be out of control, or they're. So listen to the good guys and copy what they're doing that makes them good. And then if you really, this is the advanced thing. If you really want to learn about your own operating, record the contest and then listen to it later. I'm not saying listen to the whole contest, but I operated 48 hours in one contest from VE3 EJ in a DX contest. The whole 48 hours, didn't sleep at all. And I recorded it. And so just for fun, as I'm driving home, I listened to the first day, or a recording from the first afternoon. And it's great, man. Guys are calling me. I'm getting 2 calls at a time. I can work a guy and then say, okay, who was the DL? Awesome. And then I listened to Sunday afternoon, same time. I was a total lid. I mean, guys would call me and I would get half their call, even though they were perfectly in the clear. I had to ask for lots of repeats. And that just gives you an example of what fatigue does to you. And so it helps to kind of get that appreciation. But mostly when you listen to a recording of your own contest operating, you realize how much dead time there is. You realize how much time is wasted in tuning, in waiting for pileups, and waiting for the other guy, in just extraneous verbiage or words or sending that goes on. So it's a good thing to do. Next thing is accuracy, and this is on the other side of the coin for operating efficiency. Most contests will have a penalty of some kind if you make a mistake. And it's okay if you make mistakes. Errors happen, everybody does it. It's very hard to have a perfect log. Some people do it. But what you want to focus on really is learning from the errors. And so the contests that have log checking reports after the contest, you get them and take a look and see what kind of errors do you make. You may realize, oh, I always get this number wrong because I miscount the number of dits in it, or I always get G and J mixed up or something. But the key thing here is accept the errors. So it's like, do the contest, and when the contest is over, put your pencil down, send your log in. Don't spend the whole next week looking up calls in QRZ.com or whatever to see if you got them right, because it just creates a whole different set of errors. So this log washing after the contest is over is just not considered good practice. Lots of things that cause busted calls, and a lot of times it's just certain things that sound the same. In some languages, V and W are pronounced in a very similar way. A lot of languages pronounce E and I backwards from the way American English does. G and J tend to get very confused by Spanish speakers. So you just have to kind of recognize these things. On CW, anything with a dot in it is a problem. Just that simple. So you can see some examples of busted calls down here, and a lot of times it comes from either extra things that aren't expected, like Hotel Alpha 30 Sierra. That call has two problems. Number one, it's got two numbers, which people don't expect, and 0 and Sierra right next to each other are just asking for trouble because they sound a lot alike. And then a call like Bravo 9 stroke BY9GA. Well, you just don't expect to hear Bravo 9 as a prefix. Turns out it's in Western China. So anyway, those are just some examples. But as you look at your log checking reports, you may see certain calls that you make a mistake. One of the things I notice is when I notice something in the log checking report, I made a mistake, I'll almost never bust that guy's call again. So the key thing here to avoid errors is to make good QSOs. Know who you're working. And with DX clusters now, this gets really confusing because let's say you're going up the band and you're calling spots. And you're calling a guy who happens to be maybe a spot that was 5 minutes old. Well, maybe he left and somebody else is in his place. If you don't hear his call sign, you just click on it and exchange reports and then keep going. You worked a guy who isn't there anymore. So you got to know who you're working. And you also got to know who's calling you. Often when you're calling CQ, you'll hear people and they sound like they're working you, but maybe they're not. And a good clue of this is the timing is a little bit off. Sometimes, or maybe there's somebody on the same frequency as you who you can't hear. Sometimes to test this, I'll ask somebody to repeat something, even if I don't need it to be repeated. And if they repeat it, I'll know they're working me. If they don't, then I know I have a problem and I need to figure it out. But I see a lot of people advertise these pre-fill databases before the contest. And what pre-fill databases do is they make it so when you type in the call, they'll fill in the exchange information for you. It's great, saves some typing. But it's amazing how often the pre-fill information is wrong. And you get lazy, you get so you're not listening anymore because everything's filled in. And as a log checker, somebody who checks logs for a contest, I see these all the time where people just accepted what the computer said instead of what they heard, and it cost them a lot of points. Last thing, I think this is super important, motivation. You have to decide what you want to do. Remember that goal that we talked about at the beginning? If you want to achieve that goal, you have to figure out, do all the strategy things and the preparation and so on. But in the end, you cannot do what you want. You will not achieve your goal if you don't sit in the chair and work people. So butt in chair time, BIC time. It's not enough to just sit in a chair. You actually have to spend your time making QSOs. So you want to focus on being there. And sometimes that means you have to plan your life around this. You have to tell the family that you're going to be busy. You need to have the food available in advance, or where it doesn't take very long to go get some. You have to plan your rest breaks. You want to avoid station repairs. Anything that takes time away from the contest, you want to work to try to minimize. But not everybody does the whole 48 hours or 24 hours of the contest. I do a lot of them where I'm only operating half time. What I'll try to do is make sure I'm in the chair at the best hours. Let's say it's a 48-hour contest and I'm only doing half of it. I'll try to make sure that over the course of the weekend, maybe I've gotten on for all different pieces of all 24 hours, but it's all chunked up on different times on different days. But I'll always try to be in the chair during the periods where we have the best rate. So you have a choice when you're part-time of kind of saying, I'm going to do the fun parts, or I'm just going to go chase marginal openings or whatever. But in the end, it's all about that goal and getting there. One thing that people often ask about is sleep strategy. And this is, of course, very dependent on your personal situation, but you cannot train for lack of sleep. It's not something that you train for, and you can't store it up. You can do a lot of things to be well rested, which will help you when you go into the contest, like, and I'll talk about that next, but so you're left with this thing like, all right, there's essentially a candle that's only got so many hours of burning. I'm going to use it up in this weekend. But the key thing to know, and I talked about this with the recording, is with sleep deprivation, highly practiced skills will deteriorate more slowly than those which require creative thought. So I'm often doing a contest, and it'll be Sunday, and I'll have been awake the whole time. And my wife will come in and try to have a conversation with me, and we cannot have a dialogue. And yet I'm sitting there working, guys, on CW, often while we're trying to have this conversation. So I can still process this CW or these people calling me because I've been doing that, and it's just so practiced and so subconscious. And yet breaking out of that and answering a question like, what do you want for dinner, becomes really hard because it requires a different kind of thinking. So just something funny to think about. The best thing you can do for sleep strategy is get extra sleep the week before the contest as much as you can. Don't try to stay up late the night before the contest. Sleep as much as you can. And then during the contest, if you do need to take a break or sleep, try to plan it out for 90 or 180 minutes. That's about how long a sleep cycle is. And what you'll find if you go 90 or 180 or a multiple of 90, you tend to be closer to wakefulness when the alarm will go off, and it will not be hard to wake up. If you set your alarm for 60 minutes, that's often when you're in the lower part of the sleep cycle, and then it's really hard to wake up. And some of the guys, when they know they're doing a big, long contest, they'll try to avoid caffeine, like no coffee, no soft drinks for the first day, so that when they drink caffeine the second day, it really charges them up. Another thing that I find is really, really helpful for motivation is online scoreboards. So there's a site called contestonlinescore.com. And you can go there, and everybody who's reporting their score gets shown on this website, and the scores update every 2 to 5 minutes. And the logging software that you're using can be set up to send your score to the scoreboard. So if you have a logging program like N1MM or WriteLog, or I think just about any of them, and you have an internet connection, set it up so in the background, as you're working people, doesn't require any thinking, just in the background, every 2 or 5 or 10 minutes, it will send your score to the scoreboard. And sometimes in a contest, what I'll do is put the scoreboard up on my second monitor, and I'll make it a game, just like if I was in a running race where I could see my competitors in front of me or behind me. Now I've got the scoreboard. I can see, oh, all right, I'm going to try to stay ahead of that guy, or I'm going to try to catch up. And if you're doing part-time efforts, this is great because you can sit down, see where you are on the scoreboard, and say, I'm going to go catch the next guy. And you just try really hard and really hard and really hard. When you catch them, you go, okay, great, I made it. Now I can go do something else, or I'm going to go leave. This has ended up making me operate many, many more hours than I normally would, just because I'll get fascinated with trying to catch somebody, and then I keep going. And it's also great if you're part-time because you can see where you were when you left, and then you'll see you've dropped back down the scoreboard. Now you pick a new target and you work your way back up. But I think these things, to me, have done more for improving my motivation in contests than anything. It's just having some idea of how it's going. It's no longer a game of sitting in your basement by yourself and then waiting until after the contest is over to see how you're doing. Now, there's a flip side. If you get way behind, it can be very demoralizing. So you have to approach this with a good attitude, which is, hey, I just want to see how I'm doing and see if everybody else is having a good weekend or not a good weekend or whatever. But don't let yourself get psyched out. If it's really bothering you, just don't look. In the end, no matter what's going on, you want to keep pushing. You want to use your time wisely. So the clock does not stop. The contest starts, the contest ends. That's the time box. How much of that time you use and how well you use it is what has a big factor in determining your score. Pay attention to accuracy, because not only do you lose the contact, but you also lose some penalty. So they're particularly painful. You never know which QSO is going to make the difference. There's a lot of contests that have been won here recently by just a few QSOs or one multiplier. So you want to just keep pushing and pushing. And everybody got the same conditions. So if conditions are bad, they're bad for everybody. It doesn't mean you can't win. It doesn't mean you can't do well. It just means it's maybe not going to be as much fun as some other weekend when conditions are great, but that's part of the game. If you're new to contesting, this book by Doug Grant, K5ZD, it's published by ARL, is really good. Does a good job of covering all this stuff that I've talked about here, but in a little more detail. And it's got some great advice. So if you've got somebody who's interested in contesting, this would be a great gift to give them. So in the end, contesting success is really a system. It requires equipment and antennas, obviously, infrastructure. Requires having a good strategy and understanding the game, and it requires operating skills. And you put all those things together, you can do really well. So with that, I think we've got a couple of minutes left. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have, or we can call it a day. I don't even know how many people are on here.
About 40.
Wow.
Boy, if that's you at hour 43, that's not too bad.
Well,
I'm looking hour 43.
So anyone have any questions, comments, other suggestions, something I missed?
Well, next week is the ARLDX, so.
Right, so next weekend's one of the really good ones. It's 48-hour contest. It's on phone. Starts Friday night, goes to Sunday night, and it's the ARLDX contest. So it's USA and Canada works the world. And what makes it so much fun, especially here in New England, is all the rest of the world's looking for us. So if you can get a frequency, or especially if it's, let's say, 15 or meters opened, you can call CQ and you can get plenty of DX to call you, because they are all just tuning up. All those Europeans are tuning up and down the band looking for a new American to talk to. So it can be really fun. It doesn't have quite the DX participation that the CQ Worldwide does, but it's more fun because people are looking for us.
And you know, in Vermont, we are about as close to Europe as anyone, except the guys in Maine, and of course the guys in Prince Edward Island. So we're close and we're rare. So if you get on and yell Vermont enough times, you're going to attract some attention. You know, usually 20 meters in the morning is the place you want to head to. Hopefully you should be able to work a few people. You know, the bands are up and down these days, so you never know. You'll never know unless you give it a try. You know, you can watch all the clusters all you want, but you got to get in there and get into the battle, as they say.
Hey, Randy?
Yes.
I've heard like in a contest, sometimes it's best for a QRPer to wait till the second day when all the big guns are have already talked to each other and they're looking for, you know, what's left over, and it might be easier for a QRP to get in there on the second day as opposed to trying to break pileups.
Yes. So good observation. obviously, as we go through the contest, you're working people, and as you work them, you can't work them again on that band. So the population of unworked people gets smaller over time. And so that does create new opportunities where you'll hear people call lots more CQs with no answers on the second day than the first day. And so as a low power station or a QRP station, that's a good opportunity for you. No one else is calling them. I will offer this caveat though. If you just say, well, I'm not going to get on until the second day, you may have missed some fantastic conditions on the first day. So oftentimes as a QRP station, it's not so much about being QRP as it is just being the right guy in the right place at the right time. In ARLCW last weekend, was it last weekend? Whenever it was, it was amazing how I would have a string of Europeans call me, and I would have some guy who's running a kilowatt and it would be puny weak, and then I have some guy who's running 5 watts would be really loud. So sometimes it's just about being on and a little bit of attitude, and also just understanding, hey, is this guy loud to me? Then I'm probably going to be loud enough to him to work him. But I will admit that Friday night is almost a total waste if you're QRP or, don't have very good antennas. You get on at the start of the contest, and it's just so hard because all the big guys are working everybody. And so there's been a number of DX contests where I went and watched television on Friday night because it just was too frustrating. So it's all about timing. Pick
Randy,
times that are good for you.
Randy?
Yeah.
Speaking from that end, being I am a QRP operator, the one thing you don't want to forget is sometimes the tail end of when a band is closing or the very beginning when a band is opening. So sometimes your Friday night might be wasted on the low bands when everyone's really strong. Check 20 to see if there's any stragglers still available from Oceania or something like that. So that's one of the tricks for going through that time when you're not able to break the big pile-ups.
Yep, absolutely. It's just being where there's less competition is what it really comes down to.
Hey, your comment about attitude was pretty good too. I imagine you've been running thinking your amp was on and it wasn't, but you're actually running folks pretty quick. Right?
Yeah, although I generally notice. But yes, it's funny how we all get hung up on how much power we're running, and we have power categories because power is an easily measurable thing. But in the end, it really comes down to antennas and location and propagation. A puny, signal or puny station can be plenty loud at the right time. So that to me is one of the fascinating things about it, is you just never know. I tell people I turn on the radio and I may hear things I've heard similar to what I've heard before, but I never hear the same thing twice. After 40 something years, you'll hear things and you're like, wow, never heard that before.
Somebody asked the question, is it okay to send a QSL card to a station that they worked?
Absolutely. Contesters are funny though. We make a lot of QSOs. Like for example, I think last year I made 35,000 contacts or something like that. And so we tend to get a lot of QSL requests, and especially if you live in Vermont, you're going to get a lot of QSL requests, a lot more than I would do in Massachusetts. And so contesters we enjoy making contacts, not so much doing the paperwork. So I have to admit that I often will sit down and answer cards once every 6 months. They kind of pile up. Finally, the guilt takes over and I find some time and I work on it. And there are a lot of contesters who don't QSL at all, and I apologize for them. I look at it as marketing. It's a marketing effort. I want to answer QSLs because I want people to call me again in the next contest. So LOTW is the greatest thing since sliced bread from a QSLing standpoint, at least in terms of getting confirmations. But if you want QSL cards, send them. Just recognize some guys may not answer. And I know there's several guys in Europe, and one I'm thinking of, he will not call people who have not responded to his QSLs. So it seems like a small thing, but I do not want that guy not calling me. So I answer his QSLs.
Yeah, for a lot of us, we require a self-addressed stamped envelope because it just becomes a major post office stamp buying effort.
Yeah, I'm willing to pay for the stamp, but man, I really like those envelopes. because I just can't. I just can't. The reason I use electronic banking is I just can't stand having to get the pen and paper out and address envelopes.
So people not asking questions. I guess they know how to do this. So we'll see them all on in the worldwide.
Really.
The WPX later in the month, and then Field Day. Which,
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, I sent it to you in the chat, Randy, but since I'm up here verbally, I'll go ahead and ask you. If you attack a CW pile slightly off freak and they come back to you, do you stay where you are or do you zero beat them for the rest of the exchange?
Good question.
That is a really good question. I would stay where you are because I know pretty much the sound of what I'm listening for. That said, occasionally I've called people as I was still tuning them in and they came back to me and I finished tuning them in. The main thing about being off to the side is you're trying to get through, all those mixed signals that are right on frequency. Assuming the guy comes back to you, he should really only expect to hear one thing in his passband, which would be you. So I would probably, if you don't need to move, stay where you were. If you did move, chances are you'll probably get away with it. And I'm sorry, I don't have a way. I'm not used to using two screens here, so I don't have the chat up. That's why I'm depending on somebody else to tell me when there's something there.
Oh, just go to the bottom. Look for the thing that says chat.
Yeah, I've got two screens open, so I'm not seeing things that are normally the way I do. But anyway, what else have we got?
I don't see anything else in chat. Anyone else with a question? Speak now. Where will your piece? You'd be in the middle of contest. Oh man, what did Randy say about that? I'm trying to remember.
Well, we're going to have the recording, so you can always come back and listen to this again. Thank you for doing that, and I look forward to working you guys on the air. I'm on in most of them. Just like I said, until the pandemic is done, there's just not a lot of other choices. So that's where I'm spending my time.
I just had a thought, Randy. You're going to be assuming the COVID goes away. You're going to be in Italy next year.
So Italy, the World Radio Sport Team Championship is a contest that happens every 4 years, and it's an on-site contest where people, like the Olympics, people compete and they get, they earn their spot for their region, and then they all go compete. And right now, I'm one of the qualifiers for W1, W2, but I'm hoping it happens. But Italy is one of those places like America that's been pretty hard hit, so hope they can pull it off.
Yeah, that should. I hope so too, right? Because we were planning that. That's how I plan our vacations. What hamfest, what things going on.
Well, the great thing about WRTC is the competition's fun, of course, because we're ego-driven, maniacal contesters. But it's just great to meet all these people from around the world. That's something we don't get enough of in this game.
So you're going up. Yeah, go ahead with the question.
Nope. I'm done. I was just going to say we're finished here.
Okay, I thought someone was going to ask a question.
Oh. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Have a good day. Enjoy the rest of the Hamfest.
Thank you, Randy.
Hey,
All right, well,
Randy.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will you be around later today to join us for the expert
Pretty good call.
talk?
I will try.
Okay, great. It'd be great to have you. Thank you very much for joining us. I think we had a real fun time, and we got a lot of the heavy hitters. Looking at the room here, the guys who I expected to be here are here, so we're doing fine. Take care.
No.
All right. See ya.